The Hungarians have always had that a bit of an aggressive, we'll fight for Hungary and what we believe in. And I think that's why I have such a deep connection to the spirit of Budapest. It's because that's always been something that's inside of me since I was a young child.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. I have a very exciting guest today, somebody that I knew for years, only virtually, until very recently when she came to Cyprus. And I had the huge pleasure to spend some time with her. She is a global business leader. She is the CEO of Phoenix Global and Air. She's a keynote speaker, and she is a lot more than that. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Larisa Miller.
It's such a pleasure to be with you, Elizabeth, and it was so good to finally meet you in person in Cyprus.
We had a nice little time. I think it makes a difference. I mean, I knew you mostly from Clubhouse. We had spent time on Clubhouse, and I used to listen to you, and I used to love what you said. There's one phrase that you say that I like. I think it's people who mention, or women who mention your name in a room that you are not in. I think that one is some that really made an impression on me, and many other things. But it makes a difference when you actually get to meet somebody in person. It is different. But during the pandemic, that was all we had.
Yep. No, and I had a very brief stint on Clubhouse. I mean, it was only a few months, and then Clubhouse exhaustion set in, and you have to get back to work and actually do business. But it was a great way to be able to connect with some people around the world that have aligned values, synergies, business interests. And, I'm very, very blessed to have met you during that time and several others. And we've been able to carry relationships that we made at that time forward and turn those into business opportunities and friendships. And here I am sitting with you today for both of those purposes.
And I'm very, very glad that you're here. And I want to start a little bit from the beginning. I was listening to your speech when you were here for the Diaspora Forum, and I remember that you grew up in Pennsylvania, which is a very rural. It's not the most cosmopolitan area of the United States. How did you get curious about the world?
Oh, so I grew up on a farm outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania. I always call that the land of mediocre chocolate. But from the time I was a child, I was always very curious about the bigger world. I would look at my parents' collection of National Geographic magazines, fascinated by the differences between people around the world, how they looked, how they dressed, what they ate, what they drove, how they lived. And it was something that was inside me from childhood. And I just knew that when I grew up, somehow I was going to find a way to go out and see the bigger world, meet those people, taste those foods, and try to find a way to make an impact. And I never had any idea at that age what life would have in store for me. But being able to travel and experience and now do business in, and most importantly, while I'm doing business, find ways to empower women, elevate women, and create opportunities for women, especially in emerging markets and underserved communities. That's really important to me.
Beautiful. Did you travel with your parents?
I did. We would travel every summer. My father would take 2 weeks set aside and we would travel. I was very blessed to have parents that were globally minded. My mother and father are voracious readers. I grew up in a Hungarian household from my mother's side. So that was an innate part of my daily life. I learned to do Hungarian embroidery when I was a child. The cuisine was an important part, and that just helped to add fuel to the fire of my curiosity to go out and see the world.
Do you speak Hungarian?
I do, poorly now, because if you don't use it, you tend to forget it. But it was spoken in my household. When I went to university, I minored in it. And, I lived in Europe for many years. and had an opportunity to always find a way to practice it and use it. But now it's been quite a few years, and I'm a bit rusty. But when I do go to Budapest, within a day or two, it all starts to come back to me.
I never thought that. Unbelievable. The things that you never cease to amaze me. Budapest, now let's just catch on Budapest. For me, it's one of the most beautiful towns in the world, I think.
It's probably the most romantic city in the world. There are so many hidden treasures in Budapest, and it was one of the places, probably the only time in my life I've had a very visceral reaction to being in a place. It's like I felt a connection. I belonged there. I knew that my roots, my family come from Hungary, from Budapest, from Debrecen. But when I was actually there, it was the first time in my life I ever really felt such a strong connection, like I belonged, like that's where I was meant to be. And so whenever I need to regroup, whenever I need to clear my mind, I always take a few days and go to Budapest and spend some time by the Danube and walking and eating and exploring, and that's my refresh.
It was one of the first city tours that I accompanied as a young tour guide, and it was in '87 before it opened up.
Mm.
And then I watched it change, and I've been back a few times. It's so beautiful, and I mean now it's high quality living. Before it was difficult, they had quite a hard time. But they were the first ones, because I used to go to Prague and then to Budapest and to Prague again. In Prague, they were still very much worried about what they would say, but in Budapest, they knew what was coming somehow. They
Oh,
were
yes.
ahead.
We've always had a rebellious spirit. And if you look back through history, even well beyond the revolution in 1956, the Hungarians have always had that a bit of an aggressive, we'll fight for Hungary and what we believe in. And I think that's why I have such a deep connection to the spirit of Budapest. It's because that's always been something that's inside of me since I was a young child, and I think that it's not by accident. I think this is a large part of my nature.
You're feisty. Now I know where it comes from. Very true. Now you studied in the US, but you had a thing for the world. What was your first, whatever I want to call it, job assignment or whatever abroad? Where did you go?
So I started my career at the Department of Agriculture in Pennsylvania, and then moved to the governor's office when Governor Tom Ridge was governor. And then I set my career aside to become an Army wife. I married an Apache attack helicopter pilot in the Army. We had our family. We moved back and forth to Germany several times and lived there for many years. In fact, my youngest son was born in a hospital in Hanau, Germany, near Frankfurt. And I was never stationary when we were there. My husband was never around. It was during the peak of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. And I would load my small children into the car or on the train with a paper map in hand, and we would go and explore and see. And I didn't want to pass the opportunity to be able to be in Europe and go as many places as I could to explore. And then flash forward many years, and I find myself in Abu Dhabi, working for a very prominent family there as head of business. And that really laid the framework for me to be able to build important relationships across Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. So when it was time to transition to my next step in life, and I assumed my current position as CEO of Phoenix Global, which is now a holding company with 5 companies in the portfolio. It was just a natural transition for me because I had built a great network, relations. I had a deep perspective and understanding of the challenges, needs, the fractures that could be fixed with some innovative strategies, and put together a company that now does consulting, investment, and infrastructure development across 4 continents.
You make it sound so easy. I'm sure it wasn't always that easy. I'm sure that there were a lot of obstacles that you have to overcome. But I think, isn't that what makes us strong? Isn't that what gets us where we want to go, overcoming obstacles?
Well, my company isn't named Phoenix Global because I live in Phoenix and it's not an accident. It's because the phoenix rises from the ashes.
Mhm.
And I've had to pick myself up from the ashes so many times in my life, recognizing that no one's going to do it for me. It's up to each one of us to create our path, follow our destiny. And, it's scary to take bold steps and to do things that you're not really sure of, enter markets and spaces, or start a business, or even walk into a room of strangers. These moments that are really paralyzing sometimes are the moments that we really need to put ourselves out there, because that's where the greatest opportunities lie. Courage is the anti-venom to regret. And I never want to get to 80 and look back and say, I wish I had walked into that room instead of turning around and walking out. Or I wish I would have just taken that step and started that business that I always wanted to. Now it's too late. First of all, it's never too late. But, at the end of the day, I live in fear almost every day. That's something, that's a really significant statement to make. And it's because I'm constantly pushing myself. I'm going to levels and limits. I'm building things, trying things, thinking about things many times that are not in my, typical frame of expertise, or industries or sectors where I've ever been doing business. I'm always trying to step in and put myself in uncomfortable situations so that we can build things that are extraordinary, establish business models that, doing business in ways that others aren't. So we'll have opportunities that others don't have. And that means I fail, voraciously, and do it in a very large way several times, many times. But I always remind myself that even if I fail at something, I'm never starting over. I'm never starting from zero. I'm starting from a place of experience. And that leads me to go on. I pick myself up, I brush myself off, and I go at it again. I may do it in a different way, but I still keep at it. And that's what's led me to where I am today.
Yeah, you said something very important, which is nobody's going to do it for you. I think this is something that we have to be aware, and that's something that many people maybe don't really get 100%. And I also believe that we have to be responsible for our decisions, because every decision has consequences, and sometimes we just have to understand that we messed up. And as you said, start again with the experience that we gained.
Well, it takes a bit of self-coaching. We have to talk ourselves into this. I mean, I always say that little voice in our heads at 3 a.m. is the most powerful catalyst to preventing us from doing things, because we'll go to bed confident in a decision that we make at 11 a.m. and then we wake up in the middle of the night and that little voice is telling us, you're not experienced enough, you're not good enough, you're not well known, you haven't been at this, or it's a really bad idea. It tells us so many really damaging things. And it's up to us to learn how to tell that little voice in our heads to back off and to be quiet, and to, make sure that even though we're unsure, even though we don't feel like we're good enough or educated enough or experienced enough, that we take those steps anyway, that we take the first step and then the second step. And it's great to have the biggest, grandest goal for yourself set. But if that's the only thing that you're working towards, you're never going to get there, because there's going to be so many setbacks along the way. And the first time you have a setback or two or three, you start to think, oh my goodness, maybe I'll never get there. Maybe I need to set some other goal for myself. And you quit. And my belief is that you need to set small benchmarks all along the way, so that you're always rewarding yourself, patting yourself on the back, seeing small successes, and that keeps you going. So that even if you get knocked back a bit, the next benchmark isn't that far away. And so it entices you to keep going, rather than just looking at the big picture and thinking, my gosh, I'll never get there. There's attributes that that we need to be able to develop that set us apart from those who want to be leaders, from those who are leaders. The ability to make a decision. There are so many people who get paralyzed with the inability to finally decide and take a step forward. Or we have to ask 100 people, what would you do if you were me? Or if you were in this situation, what would you do? They don't have the full measure of perspective that you have. So their answer is not really going to be all that valid, or helpful. And in fact, many cases it furthers the doubt you have, and it keeps you from being able to take that step. So I say, if you want to be a leader, if you want to make a big shift in your life, just make the decision and do it. Don't ask anybody for their permission. Don't ask anyone for their advice. Make the decision and do it. You know, see it through to the end. Sometimes the end is bitter and sometimes it's sweet, but each conclusion you get to leaves you stronger than you were at inception. So make the decision and go.
Yeah, and I also think that some of those people that we ask, they project their fears on their own fears on you, the things that because they wouldn't dare, they tell you,
Even worse than that is many people will tell you you can't do it because they're afraid you will. They
Exactly.
can't do it themselves. They've always thought about it. They've wished about it. They don't have any idea how to do it. And now here you are talking about doing it. We are sabotagers many times more than we are supporters, which is a trait that we need to break. But asking people, for their opinion, there are so many underlying factors that contribute to what their answer is, what their narrow minded perspective is, the fact that they want to give you an answer, but they don't truly have any understanding of the space that you're asking, or that they don't want you to do it. So, my thing is, have one really good, trusted confidant that is a shoulder to cry on, that is someone to bounce ideas off of. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for getting from point A to Z, and that's your life, A to Z. No one else is. So make the decision and go. For better, for worse, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to think a lot. You're going to grow a lot as a person. You're going to be stronger, more resilient. You're going to be more tolerant, more empathetic. It's going to build you, your character, your strength, just by taking the first step and making the decision to do it.
Fantastic. And as the saying goes, you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step because, but then again, I mean, it is important do you agree with it? It is important to set goals because I believe that when you set goals, you recognize opportunities.
I think you have to set goals because you have to know where you're going. You're
Yeah.
just not wandering through this life aimlessly. You have to have an idea of where you want to go. But you have to be flexible with those because the goals, the pathways, the dreams you have for yourself in your 20s are going to be entirely different when you get to your 40s. And you're going to find unexpected opportunities along the way that change the course and direction of your life. You're going to think that you're going to be on this pathway for your whole life. And one chance meeting or conversation with someone, or one opportunity to take a pivot and step into a new area that you may not be familiar with, or explore a new industry or sector that you find now, my gosh, I have such a great interest in this now. This is what I want to do. If you are unflexible, if you are rigid, if you are too afraid to explore something new, you're going to find yourself stuck in the silos of life. But when you're flexible, when you're present, when you're paying attention, when you're brave enough to take steps and try new things, that's when the beauty of life and the opportunities and the destiny that is meant for you really unfolds in front of you. I did an interview about 2 years ago, at the first AI to human interview, where an AI interviewed me, which was a bit unsettling because they can find anything and you don't know what they're going to ask. But the last question the AI asked me is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I turned it back around on the AI and I said, you with all of your infinite wisdom, where do you see me in 5 years? And it came back with this nauseating and long diatribe of where I'm going to be in 5 years. And my answer to that question is, I have absolutely no idea. Because if 5 years ago I had tried to guess where I would be today, I would have been wrong. 2 years ago, I would have been wrong. I'm along for the journey. I'm present. I'm always looking for new opportunities, way to make the things I do better, looking for new spaces to learn about and step into. And that's where the beauty of life comes. That's where the extraordinary opportunities come. And that's what's going to lead you to 80, where you look back at a life with satisfaction and fulfillment and not regret.
Yeah, I think that's the worst, isn't it? People don't regret what they did, but they regret what they didn't do. And that's, as you said so beautifully, that's not what we want. We want to be able to look back and say, yes, I did all that. Sometimes it was wrong or sometimes it was stupid, but it's fine because we learned a lesson. Now, let's talk a little bit about those people who don't have all the opportunities we have, because we have a lot of opportunities. And on our side of the world where we grow up, we are responsible for what we do, but not everybody is. And I know that you spend time in countries where it's not so easy. I heard you talk when you were talking at the diaspora. I heard you talk about, you go to Iraq, you were talking about the little Palestinian girl. What do you say to these people?
So it's always been, again, something that's been inside me since I was small, where I hated seeing people that that didn't have access to the opportunities, that were mistreated by others verbally. Those are the things that really bothered me. And so since I've been small, I've always looked at how I can make an impact on other people and how I can help somebody who might be stuck to be able to change their life. Working in Abu Dhabi, I had the opportunity to be able to go in and out of refugee camps in Iraq and Jordan and Yemen and orphanages in Morocco and villages across rural Africa, and meet people and learn from their stories and see the humanity that exists in people who live without so much of which we take for granted, but finding ways through the tools, the resource, and knowledge that I have, to be able to help them to find ways to take the circumstances that they're in and create opportunities, whether it's opportunity for social entrepreneurship, whether it's opportunities to take their skills and knowledge to be able to build small businesses, or my personal passion is agriculture. So to be able to take someone with a small family farm and through a few tweaks, help them to see greater yields or find new offtake markets for the commodities that they grow. It's something that is a personal mandate of mine. It's an ingrained part of my business ethos. When you recognize that for women alone, there's 400 million women, voiceless women in poverty, who have so many skills and capabilities that if you just empowered them, if you just gave them the tools to be able to turn on the abilities that they have, we would be able to turn around national economies. We would be able to effectively remove poverty around the world. But it all takes from those who have, making it a priority to help those who have not. And I promise you that when you work with people, when you sit with people, when you sup with people who live without the things that you take for granted, you will come away with bigger lessons and more value added to your life than you can even contribute to them. Some of the stories and lessons I've learned from the people in refugee camps, the women who would welcome me in and offer me all the food they had for the day as a gesture of hospitality. I think, my gosh, would we, if a stranger came to our door, would we offer them all the food that we had for our family for the day? And the answer to that is a resounding no. And yet here's people who have nothing, and yet they would give everything they had as a gesture of kindness, friendship, and hospitality. And that's the kind of individual I endeavor to be. And I've learned so many lessons. My personal ethics, integrity, they all are enhanced and strengthened by sitting with and learning from people who live without much that I take for granted.
Yeah, and they are very often not, they are sometimes happier than we are with all what we have because they do appreciate what they get. And we forget. I think we often forget how well our lives are.
There was a little girl at a refugee camp in Mosul, Iraq, and I was the only female there traveling with the Emirates Red Crescent, and she stayed glued to me. She had a death grip on the side of my pants, or she would hold my hand. She would just never let go of me, and she was with me almost all through the day. And at one point, they tried to break us away from the crowds in the refugee camp, and I said, no, let her stay with me. And she stayed with me all day. And towards the end of the day, we were crouched down in a corner, and one of my Emirati friends came over and crouched down and asked her, in Arabic, what do you want? And she looked at him with a big smile, mismatched clothes, shoes that didn't fit. And she said, I don't want anything. I have everything I need. And it was that moment that reminded me that, while our kids always want the next video game system that comes out, or we'll be happier when we get a house, we'll be happier when we get a bigger house, we'll be happier when we get a job, then we'll be happier when we get a promotion, we'll be happier when we get married, we'll be happier when we get divorced. There's always something that we set at the next level that we have to work towards, that is what we say is going to make us happy. And when we get there, there's something next, and there's something next. And we never truly just stop and look around us and realize that we have every reason to be happy. We have everything we need and more, probably too much. And that we need to stop chasing the next thing. We need to stop looking at outside catalysts as being the sources of our happiness, and just recognize that we have families, we have homes, we have jobs. We can go outside in the morning and listen to the morning birds sing. That's where happiness comes from, not in accumulating things or getting job promotions or making sure that our house is bigger than our neighbor's house.
I heard somebody call it the more disease once, and it's
It's
kind of a
exactly.
disease, isn't it? Now, I know that I'm looking at the time. Don't worry, I am keeping a tab on time. Before I let you go, you said before you go to Budapest when you need to feed your soul. Where else does Larissa Miller go for fun, not to work?
Fun. I love to be with my family, my children. Um, it's funny how when you're young, before you have kids, you travel, and that's where you get fulfillment. And while I'm very blessed to be able to travel and see the world constantly, on a professional scale, what really makes me happy, where my fun comes, is just spending time with my family, my kids who are now grown. So when they have time for mom, it's one of those special times for me. And that's really what I cherish the most, or just making the most of the times that I have with my kids, watching them as adults, being proud of where they are as adults, and knowing that at the end of the day, the professional side goes away. People that find you important today won't even think about you tomorrow, but it's your family that's around you that matters, and that's where I get my fulfillment, and that's really where my fun comes from.
Yeah, and I think we sometimes forget that, don't we? Because as you said before, we always want more and we always want to go further and we always want to do, and then we forget really what's really important. I think, yeah, what is really important in life? It's not things, it's the little things. And as you say, it's family.
Indeed. And when you're blessed to be able to wake up every day, even if you're by yourself and your family is far away, there's solace in the peace around you. And we are so busy in our lives, and we're so rushed, and we open our eyes in the morning, and the first thing we do is look at our phone to see who texted or emailed, or we run Zoom calls all day long. And we just fail to make some room and space for silence, just to go out and take a deep breath and hear the songbirds. And for me this morning, I woke up and made my coffee, and there was a male and female cardinal hopping out on the deck, and I just stood there and watched it, knowing that I really should get in my office and get my day started. But these are the moments that ground us, that relax us, that remind us that there's a much bigger picture out there than Zoom calls and emails and flying off to meetings. While they're all really important, at the end of the day, that inner peace you create with yourself. And I'm a bit hypocritical because I say it, and many days I forget to do it. But it's so important that we do prioritize that.
Well, that's fine. We all forget, but at least you have it in your mind. One last thing before I let you go.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me about AIR.
So, Air, which we've created the world's first social streaming platform, it started 2 years ago when I saw my kids all sitting together and they all had headphones on. And it dawned on me how isolating streaming is, how technology allows us to come together and access one another and talk to one another from around the world, but it's horribly isolating at the same time. We're losing our sense of connection to one another and our sense of humanity. And I thought, what if we could create a platform that allowed us to have really interesting content, crowdsourced content, where people around the world can be listening to a sea shanty from Ireland, or Mongolian throat music, or Hungarian folk music, or music from the 80s, and see who else is listening to that and connect with them and build relationships around that initial basis of shared interest. And so we've been spending the last 2 years building a first of its kind platform, which will launch to the world on October 1st. And it's an opportunity for undiscovered music artists around genres to be able to get their music on a global platform, where thought leaders, subject matter experts, influencers can have a home to be able to create and distribute content to a global audience and to find and build their tribe. And that's been the basis of AIR, and we're really excited to be able to bring it to the world.
You mean maybe they could listen to our podcast episode together, those people?
Absolutely. And I think that's the important part of this, is that we can take podcasts that people may discover or may not discover, that may get lost in the noise of podcasts, and we can turn them into streaming radio content where people all around the world can tune in, listen, and more importantly, connect with one another. And that's really the basis of what we wanted to build when we set out to create Voices, a global audience, and that's where we're going to be.
Amazing. And I am very curious, and I very much look forward to trying it. And it has now, the time has now gone, and I really, really appreciated that you took the time to speak to me. Thank you for being on Most Memorable Journey.
It's a pleasure. I thank you so much, Elizabeth. Anytime I can add value to you, your listeners, I look forward to doing so.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.